I have a crazy theory for you. What if the Infinity Stones are still here? Stay with me for a second. The Infinity Stones each represent an aspect of reality, and they were around even before they existed as stones. So did they really just vanish? Well, these things were made during the Big Bang from six singularities. Each is one fundamental aspect of the universe. Without it, the universe becomes vulnerable to all kinds of danger. So when Thanos turned the stones to atoms, he pretty much removed a core part of what keeps the universe stable.
Where are the stones?
Gone. Reduced to atoms.
You used them 2 days ago.
We used the stones to destroy the stones.
However, and this is important, being atomized doesn't equal total destruction. All that power needs a vessel. So if that vessel's not a stone, is it a person? This isn't exactly a new concept for the MCU. We know that the Infinity Stones can have different shapes. The Reality Stone took the form of the ether. Does that look like a stone to you? In the comics, this becomes even more explicit. During the Infinity War saga, Adam Warlock grants the stones sentience, and they fuse the Reality Stone with Ripley Ryan, the Time Stone with Hector Bautista, and the Soul Stone with a being known as Multitude. So the idea of Infinity Stones existing within a person isn't new. We've already seen it with Vision, but this time, it might be happening on a much larger scale. This theory gets even stronger when you consider that six specific characters started showing powers very similar to the stones themselves. So, who are these chosen ones? Time Stone? This one's kinda obvious. It's none other than Loki, who is now the god of time, but it's not his new status as the successor to He Who Remains that makes him the obvious choice. Even before that happened, Loki started unlocking powers he never really had. Loki's main power set throughout the films had always been his unique Asgardian magic taught to him by Freya. Illusions were his bread and butter, and while he had experience with wielding an Infinity Stone before via the scepter, that still didn't give him mind control powers. That is, until he was captured by the TVA. After that, his entire power set started to revolve around time. Most notably, he started to gain the ability to time slip. Loki started slipping without any real control over this new ability, becoming an inconsistency in the timeline itself. Now, the show explains it as his place in time being unstable after Sylvie killed He Who Remains at the Citadel. But that doesn't explain how he's able to slip through literally every point in time. This is backed up by the fact that Loki is the only person who this happens to. Time slipping isn't even a known phenomena in the universe. You'd think the TVA of all people would know about it. Later, Loki learned to control this ability by focusing on who he wants to see. But let's dial it back. Where else have we seen someone explore multiple points in time? That's right, it was with Doctor Strange. And how did he do it? Thanks to the Time Stone. Not only that, the Time Stone has always had the same green hue to it that Loki does when he becomes the god of time. It's also worth noting that before he takes his place, the timeline isn't green, but instead, it's a gradient of different colors. The Time Stone itself, as we discussed earlier, was created during the Big Bang, so it would be right at the dawn of time. But a being like Loki now completely exists outside of that flow, so it's not impossible that his actions could have influenced its appearance. This would mean that Loki is not only the reincarnation of the Time Stone, but also the very source of its power itself. Think about it. If he exists outside of time, if his actions at the end of Loki Season 2 are what's keeping the timeline together, then he's the reason the Big Bang even happens in the first place. It seems paradoxical, but in Marvel, stranger things have happened. Reality Stone. Again, there's no contender here besides Wanda Maximoff. There's been some resistance to this theory because the general argument is Wanda should be the Mind Stone. But really, that doesn't work. Simply because the Mind Stone isn't what gave Wanda her powers. It just awakened the dormant ones she already had. Plus, if it did give her those powers, why does Pietro have super speed? Also, none of Wanda's power set really lines up with what we know the Mind Stone can do. When you think about the Reality Stone, though, a lot of her recent actions start to make sense. During the Big Bang, a certain type of cosmic energy was radiating constantly. This was known as CMBR radiation. Not only was it around the time of their creation, but this energy has been traced back to the Infinity Stones themselves. This is the only known instance of this kind of energy existing in the MCU. The only one, except Wanda.
My equipment registered an extremely high level of CMBR. That's
Relic radiation dating back to the Big Bang.
When she used her chaos magic to create the Westview anomaly, the stuff was oozing out of the place. Why does Wanda's magic in particular radiate the same thing we've only seen from an Infinity Stone? Probably because she's the next Reality Stone. And if that's not enough, let's take a look at the Westview anomaly itself. The whole thing isn't like any kind of magic we've ever seen before, and there have been plenty of users for comparison. She created an entire fake reality, complete with its own town, residents, and kids, simply from her mind. She created another version of Vision, Billy and Tommy. A new house, a new life, new memories. It was unlike anything we've ever seen before. And it wasn't just a simple illusion because it affected everyone in the vicinity, including the residents. And Wanda did that in a moment of grief that led to a burst of chaos magic. That's a level of rewriting reality that only an Infinity Stone should be able to pull off. And lastly, even the red glow of her magic is exactly the same as that of the Infinity Stone. I know it might seem silly to go off colors for something this major, but two sources of energy looking the same, functioning the same, and emitting the same kind of radiation? Well, two's a coincidence, three's a pattern. The Mind Stone. When you think about it, the obvious contender might be White Vision. He's a recreation of a being that was already bonded with an Infinity Stone, or was at least powered by it. But looking at it a bit deeper, there's one other new player that perfectly fits the bill. Robert Reynolds, aka the Sentry.
That's Bob.
Yeah, he's changed a little.
My great honor to introduce to you the Sentry.
First, let's just talk about how he got his powers. He was experimented on as a part of Project OXE and injected with the Golden Sentry serum. This serum so far killed everybody who took it, with only Bob surviving. But even then, when have we ever seen a super serum give somebody these kinds of abilities? The dude's a walking hacks. There are literally people with super serums in them that he's manhandled. Even at a first glance, it's clear to see that enhanced people like Bucky aren't in Sentry's league. But you know, that's not the strangest part. The flying, the extreme super strength, the heat vision, it's all the rest of his abilities. The split between being the Sentry and the Void.
You all know the truth. You can't outrun the emptiness.
The fact that so much of his powers revolve around his own mind. When Bob feels good, he's on top of his game. When he doesn't, though, you get the Void, whose entire thing is screwing with someone's mind.
John?
He's able to make people relive their worst memories, trap them in shadows, and amplify his abilities, or weaken Sentries simply based off of how Bob's mental state is doing. I don't know about you, but that pretty much sounds like the Mind Stone to me. On top of that, if you look close enough, the only source of color in the Void is his glowing yellow eyes. And yeah, it's the same glow the Mind Stone has. All in all, the extreme power Bob's come to possess just doesn't make sense when you consider what it came from. A serum, and we've had so many of them now, has never been able to do that. But when you consider that he might be a walking Infinity Stone, well, suddenly the power of 1,000 exploding suns doesn't seem like an over-exaggeration. The Soul Stone. This one's easily the most mysterious out of all of the stones. There's no other character more fitting than Adam Warlock, who has always been closely tied to the Soul Stone, even in the comics. Adam's connection with the stone goes far beyond just being bonded with it or wielding it. He is the true host of the stone itself. In many storylines, the Soul Stone forms a deep bond with Adam, which lets him do things no other wielder can. It's usually set inside his forehead, and in some stories, like Infinity Wars, his own soul resides within the stone itself. With that information in mind, it's easy to understand why there's no other candidate for the Soul Stone. Adam is an outlier in one way, though none of his abilities really feel out of the ordinary. But at the same time, extremely little is known about the Soul Stone's abilities and what it can do in the MCU. What we do know is that the Soul Stone demands emotion. It's easily one of the most sentient stones in the comics, constantly enforcing its own will on its hosts. Adam's entire character arc is exactly about that, discovering his own identity. Plus, Marvel's really intentional with how it uses color coding. Notice how Adam's golden energy lines up exactly with the hue of the Soul Stone? The Space Stone. It's a little more complicated for the Space Stone. Here, we have two people, Monica Rambeau and America Chavez. But let's start with the most obvious one first, America Chavez.
I can travel the multiverse.
What?
That's a problem. I don't know how. Can't control it. Only happens when I'm really, really afraid.
So, it doesn't take a lot of theorizing to realize that America's powers are absurdly unique. No one in the MCU can hop between universes, dimensions, worlds, and space like she can. Even the portals she opens up look oddly like Tesseract portals being opened. Plus, it's really just the scope of her abilities that makes her such an obvious choice. Those abilities were the center of the plot in the multiverse of madness. Even Wanda and Strange were hell-bent on her abilities, because they seemed to break the limits of kind of teleporting we've seen so far, and she's the only one of her kind.
This universe doesn't have a me.
What?
None of them do.
But in my opinion, this theory falls apart for two reasons. One, America was born with her powers. She didn't obtain them after Thanos reduced the stones to atoms. I say reduced because you can't really truly destroy matter, especially not something like the stones. All the others? They got their strange abilities after that happened. Loki's time slipping, Wanda's reality warping, Sentry's mentally influenced powers, and even Adam Warlock was fully born after Endgame. The second reason is that in the comics, her powers don't ever come from the Space Stone, and they're never tied to it either. Instead, her universe-hopping abilities are a result of being born in the utopian parallel, a dimension that sits outside of time and space. By being exposed to a force within this dimension known as the Demiurge, she gained her powers. Now, let's move on to Monica Rambeau. Monica actually fits the criteria because she gained her abilities right after Endgame. When she passed through the barrier of the Hex, it completely transformed her on an atomic level. You might ask, why would passing through a barrier do that? Well, when you consider that the barrier is chaos magic and it contains the same radiation that the Infinity Stones do, it's not that far-fetched. It's not the first time cosmic radiation would have changed somebody in Marvel. Plus, her powers are eerily similar, phasing through matter, traveling at super-fast speeds, and changing into an energy form that lets her fly without touching a single thing. Sounds pretty Space Stone-y to me. Monica was even able to close the dimensional rift between two universes, something that should only be possible for an Infinity Stone level object. The Power Stone. Now that Wonder Man's out, we've finally been able to get a closer look at his skill set, and honestly, it screams Power Stone. Wonder Man can manipulate ionic energy, which gives him the usual superhero arsenal of enhanced strength, durability, and speed. Although, how he uses them doesn't really feel very superhero.
And you always will be.
But what's really interesting is that he can cause tremors and shock waves capable of leveling structures, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. Wonder Man in the MCU has spent his life suppressing his powers, yet despite that, they're already absurdly powerful. Also, whenever he uses them, his eyes glow a really subtle, dark purple color, which might be a hint at something more. Further, whenever we've seen the Power Stone be used before, it's either released its power as a beam of energy or as a shockwave that can level a planet.
Civilizations like wheat in a field.
If Simon begins to tap into the full extent of his powers, then who knows how far he could go. Right now, he's the closest thing we have to a Power Stone in the MCU, and I think as we see more of him and his abilities develop, we'll truly see some groundbreaking, literally feats from him. Feats that you could only imagine the Power Stone doing. Whether it's the comics or the MCU, the Infinity Stones have rarely ever been a benchwarmer. Well, unless you're in the TVA, where they are used as paperweights. It's hard to imagine we're done with them, despite the Infinity Saga being over. If this theory does end up being true, it would mean we get to see the stones in a way we never have. Not in a gauntlet, but in living sentient people who use that power for their own means. What do you guys think? Is this too out there, or is this what Marvel's building up to? Let me know in the comments.